Okay, people, welcome to another session on Facilitate the Rights and Needs of Clients. That's my name, that's my email address. Should you ever need to contact me, that's cool. You'll remember from our last session, we talked about this 7-point process about the advocacy process in general. And it sort of branches off a little depending on that second point with what the client's ability to self-advocate is, because really after that it's a case of, are they doing it or are we supporting them to make their own complaint? Let's look at a little bit more depth. We're focusing on this area here. We're doing that assessment, and do you remember we talked in the previous session, this assessment, this looking at what their ability to self-advocate is. Remember we said there's a whole stack, we did a bit of brainstorming around what are their most of the barriers that they had to not advocating for themselves was either on the emotional level or on the practical and skills knowledge basis. You got it. So on the emotional level, if it's an emotional barrier, maybe you need to advocate for them, or maybe you can offer some support and give them some practice and give them what they need to get over those emotional barriers. And in the same way, if it's a knowledge or a skills barrier, they don't know what their rights are, or they don't know where to go about finding the information they need, then maybe we can work alongside them to help them, or maybe we can offer them some training and some of those knowledge, share our skills, give them information, give them some practice and role plays. You know, you do remember that we talked about doing role plays. So therefore, that's that assessing their ability to self-advocate space there and just how much we're going to take on. You'll notice this, you probably have all noted already. Notice there's this bit of emphasis in this entire unit on we're not taking over because it can be so disempowering and paternalistic. Well done. Okay, so in this area here, if they're okay to self-advocate, then really we're just helping them with the following steps, the same steps as before. So we're helping them to gather the information, communicate with them, the person who's involved, and to follow up the progress. And it's not an on-off switch. It's not either you're full on doing it yourself or they're full on doing it. It could be you're working alongside them to help them in that area. Now, for those of you who are doing this as, well, okay, for all of you, there's an on-the-job component. There's an assessment task that you need to do to pass this unit, and that's asking you to know what the complaints process is where you happen to be doing your placement. And we actually ask you to find that out in the first couple of weeks because it might come up. So it's one of those policies you should know within the first week or two of placement or of your job, is to just go ahead and look it up in their policy manual that you should have access to. But that's kind of important because when it springs up, when there's this need to advocate for a client springs up, it is something that you want to know immediately who it is that you would go to. They're pretty much all going to look the same. They're pretty much all going to look like this. You go directly to the person or the organisation that you've got a problem with. So the individual section, yeah. So this is complaints policies in general, not just on your placement. Okay. Generally speaking, they say, go to the person that you've got a problem with, see if you can resolve it, if you feel emotionally strong enough and so on. If you're not satisfied, then go to their supervisor and their complaints department. And I think you probably all knew this already. In fact, I know for a fact that some of you have had, no, I'm not wanting to point the finger, I'm saying it's a good thing. I actually quite liked watching how some of you had concerns about the way things were being taught here. Yes, you know what I'm talking about, but just for the recording's sake, some of you had concerns about the way things were being taught or the things you were being taught. You went to the person directly. You got no great love there, so you went instinctively without, I'm guessing, having looked up our policy manual. you instinctively knew the next thing I need to do is go to the supervisor. And you did that, and I congratulate you. I think that's a good thing. It's good practice. It's good practice in two ways. One is it's good for you to have had some practice at doing that, and it's also best practice. So it's two different meanings of the word practice there, but you get it. For the sake of the recording, I should note it wasn't me that you had complaints about. If anybody did have complaints, they generally come to me directly, and they generally have it resolved straight away, perfectly, immaculately, beautifully. Okay, so then you go directly, if you're not satisfied. Now the next stage is what I'm going to spend a bit of time on today. The next stage is if you're not satisfied, if you can't get it resolved from within the organisation, one of your options is to speak to an independent ombudsman, or sometimes we call them a commission. Let me just resolve a problem I've got with my microphone at the moment. That's better. Okay, so an ombudsman is, it's a good question. I don't have it on a slide, but an ombudsman is a person or an organisation. They are actually funded by the government, but they're sort of at arm's length. So they're non-government. I think they'd actually call them quasi-non-government. So they're independent from government. Typically a former magistrate or barrister, a lawyer, someone who knows the law and is able to actually put together a report that says, here's how you're going so far. Here's where the complaints are going. Here's how you're going at meeting your human rights obligations. Here's how you're going at meeting your objectives in general. And that gives us this third step that you can see on the screen, that gives us a person who's external to the organisation who can help you with saying, okay, Centrelink, for example, if you had a complaint with Centrelink, let's say they had an automated system that was sending you fine requests, telling you that you had to pay money that you didn't believe you did. So fine, go directly to the organisation, step one. They may well say, we can't do anything about that because that's our policy, you have to pay it. Even if you go to the supervisor or their complaints department, they'll still say, no, that's our policy. I'm employed by the organisation, I'm not in a position to change the policy. The ombudsman is a little bit different. The ombudsman is able to look at it and go, yep, I can see the policy is that they're making you pay an unfair amount, and that goes against their principles, their human rights obligations. It's just plain unfair. It shouldn't be that way. And they can argue on your behalf. They can put in reports to change the organisation. They can give you a bit of extra leverage. So let's take a look. You remember our friend Letitia? I'll quickly remind you of the story here. She and her 3-year-old Jill shares a house with her friend Brad. He's living with us while he studies at TAFE. We share the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping. We go out together sometimes. It's not a relationship with friends. But about a month ago, Centrelink came to our place and asked lots of questions, like if I ever cooked for Brad. And I said, yeah. And they said, cool, you're in a relationship. Your pension's cancelled because it's a combined thing. And she hasn't had any money in the meantime. The process is, we assess what their needs are. Okay, that's obvious, she's not getting any money, she thinks the rule is unfair. We can check out by her mannerisms, by who she is and how she acts, whether she could advocate for herself. So I'll put the question to you, how do you think we could advocate? Okay, I'll just pause the recording while we have a moment. Okay, and we're back. So we could begin by going straight to the next step alongside Letitia. We can use all of those communication skills that we're just talking about. We could also go straight to, if she's okay to self-advocate, help her to gather the information. And here's where I expect that you've got some skills. Excuse me. You've got some skills. You'll be able to help her gather the information she needs, because you've been to my class and you know all about how to find stuff good and quickly. She's probably got what she needs. It's just a knowledge gap based on, yeah, all that stuff put together. So there's this website that can help you a lot. I think some of you have heard of it. It's called google.com.au. It's a search engine. If you were in my legal and ethical class, can I just have a show of hands? Okay, very nearly all of you who've been in my legal and ethical class, and you'd remember me teaching some skills on looking stuff up on the internet, knowing what to accept and what not to. For those that didn't, or even for those that did, here's a refresher. Or you tell me, if you needed to find Centrelink's, I'm picking on Centrelink a lot today. My apologies, but in Letitia's case, if we needed to find Centrelink's complaints policy nice and quickly, we would do a site search. Do you remember, people, how to do that? It's definitely a .gov.au. It's definitely a government website from Australia. So now people are remembering. Okay, site, so no spaces. You search in Google or Bing or Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or whatever your search engine of choice is. Type in the word site, then a colon, and then the domain or the website. So if you only know that it's an Australian government site but you don't know the full website name, that's okay. We can search, we could type this in, do that on your phone now if you like, and every result that you come up with will end in .gov.au, and it will include the words Centrelink and the word complaint somewhere. So that's useful. That means we can find it really quickly without having to mess around too much. If the URLs, if the websites change, we can live with that. A second technique is, if we know the exact phrase that is in the web page we're after, we use inverted commas. So that search I just brought up then will search only websites that end in .gov.au, that include the word Centrelink, and that include the exact phrase, appeal my decision, if you know the website happens to have that exact phrase, or whatever exact phrase you're after. That first search, searched on government sites for the word Centrelink and the word complaints, but they could appear anywhere in the document and they're probably not one after the other. So is that what you found when you're looking on the phones? Okay, so it's in the headline. Okay, so sometimes it was together, but sometimes it wasn't, if you look at your search results. So that will narrow things down quite a lot if you use inverted commas and if you do a site search. It doesn't have to be a government one. If you happen to know the organisation that you're working for example, is uniting.org, you know their website, then this search I just brought up in would search only within the uniting.org website for the word complaints. And Google's clever, it will bring the most relevant ones probably to the top. That's going to make your life a whole lot easier if you're putting that stuff into practice and getting in the habit of doing it regularly so that you can do it super fast. So that's one website, google.com.au, should you need to write that down. None of you are writing, you know that already. Here's another website that I also find really valuable. It's called Complaint Line. I used to give it the prize as the ugliest website still in existence this decade. It has a very 1990s look about it. It's gotten better. It's got rid of its complete black background it used to have, but they've kept the same logo. It's a husband and wife. This is a private activity, hobby, if you like, of a husband and wife, I think in Queensland. The reason I'm telling you this is it's not officially anybody's, but it's really quite good. Every now and then they're a little bit behind, and I send them an email saying, hey, you know, Docs has changed its name in New South Wales, and they fix it pretty quickly. So their website is www.complaintline.com.au, and it's got a huge collection. Actually, let's do an exploration. But it has a huge collection of who you would complain to. So who is the ombudsman for community services? I know who it is because I've used it fairly often. But who is the ombudsman for power and electricity and pet ownership or cruelty to pets or airlines or any of those other categories? These guys have made a pretty good effort. They've got something like 140 different categories. They've also got sample complaint letters. They've also got general hints. They've also got a range of different resources like that. So let's do a little explore of what their website looks like. Okay, so that's a couple of just good general starting points. But like I said, let's look at some other areas. I think I've mentioned already that if the general advocacy and discussion doesn't work, then there's these, what we call ombudsmen, or perhaps commissions, these independent semi-government bodies. Some of them are, because they're linked to laws and policies, some of them are federal and some of them are state. So we're going to spend a bit of time in a moment looking at which is the appropriate one for what we want. Some of them include non-government because the government funds non-government organisations, so they have a bit of a right to say that things should be done in a certain way. Okay, so the first one is the ACT Human Rights Commission. Keep in mind, I'm not going to tell you all of these commissions or ombudsmen. I don't know the difference between an ombudsman and a commission, I'm sorry. And it's not important for our purposes, but I can look it up later. The first is the ACT, so a local state one for government. That's their website, hrcact.gov.au complaints. But remember, these URLs change around a bit, so yeah, that should be good for a while yet. I checked it earlier today. This commission can deal with complaints about services for children and young people and for their carers, or services for people with a disability and their carers, health services, services for older people, discrimination. So it's an ACT local one. They have something similar in New South Wales, but it's got a different name. So that's most of the services that we're going to be dealing with as community services workers. So that's kind of handy. This is our third point down. When the advocacy and general discussion just doesn't work, we take the advocacy to the next level. There is also the Australian Capital Territory Ombudsman. Yeah, write these down as they go. I will have a handout attached to the eLearn page. The Australian Capital Territory Ombudsman takes complaints about how ACT government things have been administered. So how they've actually put stuff into practice, about education providers such as CRT and ANU and University of Canberra. So yeah, they take in us. So that's your next level if you're not satisfied with having gone directly to your teacher or to their supervisor, or the far up as the chain as you like to go. Speak to the Ombudsman and they can say whether they think the administration, the way that the policies have been put into practice, have been unfair or not. They also look at the administrative actions of the Australian Federal Police as they're behaving here in the ACT. Some of you will know this because you have lived around here long enough. Generally speaking, there's state laws that are administered by the state government and federal laws that are administered by the Australian Federal Police. The ACT is an interesting little state because it's the only place where the federal police are going to be pulling you over to give you speeding tickets, for example. And they're administering the state laws as well. So what we're talking about here is the Ombudsman the ACT Ombudsman takes complaints about how the AFP has been acting within the ACT, as well as ACT government departments and services that get their funds from the ACT government. So you'll notice there's a bit of an overlap with the one we looked at a moment ago. This is looking about how they put their policies into practice. The previous one was looking at the human rights angle as to whether their policies should be different in the first place. So they've got a different starting point. On a Commonwealth level, there's the Commonwealth Ombudsman, who does something similar. Can look at complaints about the decisions of the federal government agencies, and they've got a fairly wide brief. They can say, are they wrong or unjust or unlawful or discriminatory, or are they just plain not fair? The Human Rights Commission is again on a federal level, say humanrights.gov.au. They can investigate complaints of discrimination or harassment or bullying based on that person's, so the bullying or harassment based on their sex or their disability or their race or their age, or a couple of other areas if it's to do with employment, so discrimination against people based, discrimination, harassment and bullying based on their sexual preference, their criminal record, their trade union activity, their political opinion, their religion or social origin. So no, that's only to do with employment as far as these guys are concerned. Let me go through. Do you remember me saying, there's a bunch of tribunals and things as well. I'm not going to try to get you to analyse and memorise each of those. What I want you to do is use the Complaint Line website and keep a handout, if you like, as to what them are. This is one example. Aged Care Complaints Investigation Scheme is for anybody who wants to make a complaint about the service and care provided by government subsidised aged care services. If you think they're a victim of sexual or physical assault, speak up to make sure that they're acting legally. There's their website. The Complaints Resolution Referral Service helps with a range of other issues around government funded. So it's not actually a ombudsman as such, but it is funded by government, so it's not government itself, to help people with complaints about government funded disability employment and advocacy services. So that's aged care, disability, and again there's a range of the different services. You won't memorise all of them, but I do want you to know that they exist and to do some research to find the appropriate one, because that can be your extra step beyond the average. The others while we're at it. In some cases, this is a direct quote from their own website, they say it could be better investigated by the Privacy Commissioner, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. The tribunal is another word for there's a technical difference between a tribunal and a court, but let's consider it a court. Administrative Appeals Tribunal is going to look at the administrative ways that things are done and you can appeal a decision. Social Security Appeals, Veterans Review Board, Migration Review Tribunal, Refugee Review Tribunal. They can give you advice. These ombudspeople, these commissions, They're not going to say, no, sorry, you got the wrong one, and hang up on you. They'll actually help you find the organisation that best suits your needs. But ideally, you're going to find the right one. That's the tools we're going to use to support clients making a complaint, but there will need to be some role plays and some practice at asserting and standing up to people, and once you know your stuff, to actually do that. That will do for the theory, and we'll look at reviewing the progress, which is not actually going to take all that long as a future step. We'll spend some time on these services instead. So review progress we'll look at a future date.